and we'll hit that area very hard to try to eradicate all of that type of mosquito from the area so that it doesn't, basically break the chain so you don't get mosquitoes biting people and continuing to get more infections.
Is West Nile carried by a specific type of mosquito?
Yes, that one's a little tougher. It's Galbaticans is the species name. It'll travel up to 7 miles. So it's depending on what the mosquito is. When we know what it is, we know, do we have a little radius or do we have to throw a big cast net to try to take care of the issue? So
related to mosquitoes, big problem that we seem to have is mosquitoes. How is that related, and can that be an issue?
So it is not a function of basically county or state government. The reason we do mosquitoes is for human health concerns, not to attack it, the nuisance condition of them biting you. What we're trying to do is make sure the mosquito populations are in check so that we minimize the opportunity for human health issues. So unfortunately, I don't, if our fodder runs, it would certainly take out no-see-ums. But we do target our spraying basically towards dusk, up until about 10 o'clock at night, because the mosquitoes are generally still active through there. It does minimize impact on honeybees, because by then they typically have gone back to their hives. And the chemical we utilize, the concentration of the droplets has at least an intent not to kill honeybees. It certainly will make them sick. But it's basically a low dose, because if you just look at the overall mass of the honeybee versus the mass of the mosquito, there's plenty of the poison that will take out that mosquito, but it's generally not enough to take out a large body of insect.
No.
Hey Tim, since you brought up bees,
Sure.
you probably know where I'm going with this. We've passed it already, but for a few years I've mentioned, I haven't lobbied very hard because I know it's going to be a really heavy lift, but I'm just curious if you've ever raised it or what you yourself think about no mow May for the bees. It seems like that would be a really easy win with the commissioners, because it would save a heck of a lot of money if you guys didn't mow parks in May, and people were allowed, if they wanted to not mow in the month of May, or wherever in Florida, if it's not May, if it's a different time, like what, have there ever been any discussions about it?
So there hasn't been discussions, to my knowledge, with the board. It's certainly something we can have further discussions with the extension service. In terms of, the reality of, for example, code enforcement, if someone didn't mow in May, really by the time you would get in trouble from code enforcement to the time where we're actually starting to be serious about it, the month would be over. So it's, unless the board, has something specific to exempt it, I can't ignore a code enforcement complaint on the neighbor not mowing. But realistically, if a week ahead of May they stop cutting, well, I probably wouldn't get to a foot of growth until week 2 or week 3. And then you've got, 2 weeks to talk to the officer and probably a month to get it cut. So
Taking it from the code violation on people's properties to the county stuff, though, if you guys weren't mowing parks for a month or whatever the period that folks at Extension knew was the time that was really crucial for the bees, that's what would save the commission a ton of money and maybe help our bees. They're struggling.
we would have to negotiate, part we'd need support from Extension, and then it would be working with Michael Rhodes and Parks Department when they let the mowing contracts for the year on just changing that set of dates where you get the active mowing.
Kind of to segue mosquitoes and code enforcement, we've got a couple houses that are, unoccupied and been unoccupied for a long time. The code enforcement complaint was filed by, it may have actually been, but they still have a pool. And when you're not maintaining the pool,
It goes green.
it goes green, and because they checked it off in a year ago, I mean, I guess that's, is there anything in standing to say, until this house gets occupied and this pool gets filled, it should be on a hit list to say mosquitoes are probably a problem here.
Yeah, so what mosquito control will do, if it's within a throwing range, they'll actually throw 120-day larvicides into the pool.
Yeah.
And so if they can get it, no matter how nasty that pool looks, with that chemical in there, although you would have mosquitoes laying eggs in it, it'll intercept the life cycle, and you'll never get an adult that comes out.
The one that I know about probably is because the fence was down for the longest time and people couldn't drive through the alley, but they did get the fence up. But Navy Point lots there's nothing that's that far from the property line anyway.
Yeah.
But I guess the question is standing, if you've been hit with a code enforcement violation and it may have been abated, but if the house is unoccupied, is that is there a hit list that code enforcement's gonna come back?
So code enforcement is complaint driven. So if we have a complaint on whatever, and then the owner brings it into compliance, at that point, it's done, and we wouldn't be specifically going back to go recheck that. Generally speaking, each one of those officers has between 150 and 200 open cases at any given point. And unless I tell them to give special attention to a street or a neighborhood or these blocks, with the exception of wintertime, they just don't have enough time to proactively either go find cases or recheck. But if you've got a neighbor that's concerned, and it's been good for a month, if they're not paying attention to it, we probably are gonna have overgrowth back, or if they can see the pool and it's green.
Problem
then
is
what-
that there's a privacy fence, so you really don't see it. There is overgrowth, but unfortunately, the growth is on the easement from the sidewalk to the road, so technically that's roads and
That's-
bridges,
It's county overgrowth.
And, I people that aren't mowing that area, come on, give us a break.
But I was just gonna say, if you just, afterwards, you wanna just shoot me, I can give you an update on what it is, cause it's, what you'll see with code is, the first of the fiscal year is in October. In all reality, although it's a new fiscal year and the coffers are replenished, usually it's November or December before they really get going on the big abatements, the demos and things like that. And like as we're hitting right now, we're starting to wind up the end of the fiscal year, so I only have one or two more walkthroughs before we give the last of the contracts, because I've gotta have all of those purchase orders closed out before October. So it's, one of the things where I'm getting at is, if you let me know what it is, I can let you know if we still have it under a notice, and then where it is in the system in terms of taking care of it, because it's, if no one's paying attention to it and the house is degrading, it may be something where it's a larger abatement, more so than just, cutting some grass.
What's the criteria for county farm yard where it goes? Does that be grass or can be weeds?
Yeah, it's just,
Underbrush?
so it's just overgrowth. So generally speaking, once something gets close to about a foot tall, it's overgrowth. Generally speaking, if, it gets a little harder with shrubbery that maybe has naturally kind of done whatever it naturally would do, and but we do make them clean up, get rid of the trash debris, at least get the yard cut. And in many cases, if we have problems, if you're near a roadway to get, trash that goes underneath, a lot of times you've got to cut those shrubs up in order to get to what's starting to accumulate underneath them.
How can you, your department assist with getting rid of some of
next
that
month.
I'm sure you're familiar with.
So it's, yeah, so Robert Turpin, once a month, surveys all of our bayous. And he documents essentially a couple things, at-risk vessels, you know, maybe, they're starting to look like they're degraded and just anchored, but maybe the registration's still good. He'll have a class for that, a description for that as an at-risk vessel. He'll have another class that's starting to get close to derelict that we really need to watch when we start communicating with FWC. Maybe it's still a floating vessel, but in particular, the registration's expired. 'Cause it's just in general, that's a violation straight off the bat. And then as we start to see him take on water, you know, we're really pushing FWC hard at that point to get that, get them to declare it derelict. It's never a fast process. Once they start it, it usually takes them about 90 days, sometimes 120 days to actually get through that whole process, because it's, unlike towing a vehicle on the right of way, there's just, you know, little extra special protections for boats. So we have to, you know, exhaust every avenue we have to contact, you know, FWC has to try to contact the owner, go to the courts, get a court order to declare it. And then, once that has finally been declared, you know, at that point, when we know it's close, we'll actually put it out to bid and have a contractor on standby for the moment when we get it declared. We can issue a notice to proceed for that contractor to pull the boat.
So is there a way to find out if something's on the list? Or
Yeah.
Just call Robert and say.
I mean, you can call Robert, you can call me. I mean, we maintain spreadsheets every month on
So
which
you know
boats
where
we're
it is
tracking.
in the.
Yeah, we know where it is in the queue. I mean, you know, the savvy one, we'll go ahead and have it, you know, anchored in this part of the bayou, and then notice it's getting attention, so they'll bring it over to this part of the bayou.
Does that restart the clock?
Well, it doesn't restart it, because you still have the condition, but it does make it a little bit harder for that officer to say it's terrible. Well, someone did something. You know, a lot of times we argue that, well, you know, it actually wasn't properly anchored, and it could have drug across, or what most people, you know, fear of is, you know, you have your waterfront, and you have your own dock and infrastructure there. You know, having especially one of the old large concrete sailboats break loose and start coming across the bayou with, you know, 15, 20 knot wind, and to find your dock or your property. Yeah, bad things happen.
Oh, real frequently, more than known.
So go, Clint.
Well, just to follow up a little bit, so I was out in Bayou Chico the other day, there's 2 boats that are stickered already. That means you see the orange placard from the FWC where they have determined that is either an at-risk or a derelict vessel. That starts the 45 days to look at the owner, and then another 45 days grace period, and then, the county has to find money, and the county commission has to approve getting a grant from FWC, from the state, to contract with somebody. There's a little bit more time there. It is quite a process,
Yeah,
really.
it's painful.
There's about, right now, I think, came into Bayou Grande this afternoon. There are 4 sailboats and 2 power boats on the east side of the, NAS bridge. Okay, now, none of them are stickered, they've been there a long time, but they're starting to accumulate there. That's actually a very nice little anchorage protected area for somebody to go stick a, anchor down and stay there for a while. There's one that is stickered by the Navy Point boat ramp, that somebody left on the shore. That's a disposal. One of the challenges, I think, just in my opinion, is that the county doesn't budget anything for those, and we don't, how do I wanna say this politically correctly? We don't fine people for that. We don't have any incentive for them to not do these kinds of things. In other words, the county has to go out and ask for money from the state to pull them out, and so the taxpayers pay to pull them out at about $10,000 or $15,000 a load. So you're paying for them ultimately, which is a problem. We did have a recommendation going to the county not long ago to go to the state to ask for code enforcement to be able to declare them derelict. I don't know where that is right now.
So
I think that
that
passed.
went through the board, so, and the reason that's important, so code enforcement, one of the big, challenges and why it's typically law enforcement is you need, off of a VIN number or, other identification, you gotta have access to the database to find out who owned it, or at least the last owner. Code enforcement does have that ability where we could actually speed it up when we believe it meets all the criteria. We could confirm that it meets the criteria, we can take the VIN number or the whole number, run it through the system, you basically do all the grunt work for law enforcement, so then they get a nice package that they can take in for the declaration process. It's the state legislature has talked about taking it up the last couple of years, it's never made it to date.
So that doesn't happen now.
It does not happen now because state statute doesn't allow for the county code enforcement to have a role.
And there is actually a group, if you look on Facebook, look up the Cruisers' Rights Network. I mean, this is a bunch of people that, mostly in South Florida, but they do not want any restrictions on anchorages anywhere, for any length of time, or anything, no matter. And I have mixed emotions, personally, I have mixed emotions about this. I mean, I like to be able to have anchorages in places, but, the fact that these people are actually anchoring for indefinite periods of time, state waterways, your waterways, without paying rent, without pumping out, without, so there's some, environmental issues along with these. It's an ongoing problem in Florida. It just got passed for several counties in South Florida. There were some restrictions, I think Brevard and Miami-Dade, they have a much bigger problem than we do, but it's growing here. There are over 1 million boats registered in Florida now, registered that have powered, propulsion, that doesn't count kayaks and paddlecraft and any of that kind of stuff. And, there's getting to be a growing issue with this across the state.
Al?
Thanks, Glenn, and I'm sorry that I don't mean to take away from your good explanation there, I've just been dying to get something in on a different subject, so I hope that didn't cut you off too quickly. Tim, well, we've got some folks here from Navy Point. I always want to take a moment. While people may want to not face this, there are at least 2 pushes to sell Navy Point Park at the county that I'm aware of. There could have been other ones that I haven't been aware of. The first one happening under George Stewart, and then Doug picked it up when he came to office so many months later. And you're aware, or anybody that's ever heard me speak down at a meeting or be on the phone, that one of my primary desires in life is to get that park perpetually preserved to the utmost protection that we possibly can, whatever that may be, given, the current temperature nationally and in the state. We've got the Restore coming up that probably folks would also want to hear about, what that is and what the plans are for it. Would that be a good time for the neighborhood to come together and raise our voices and ask? I think we've got a very reasonable commissioner. I think he would hear us. We could name the park after whoever we wanted. We could name it after you, Tim. We need that park protected, and there's all kinds of deed wonkiness, and it doesn't need to be going to court, etc. It just needs to be. In 1944, that covenant set that park aside for perpetual use by the public in perpetuity. And it doesn't need to become a stretch of high-end development that would be a great ad valorem tax base for the county. Is it reasonable? Is that the time for us to go for preservation of that park?
Well, so that would be a good time. So let me talk about the Restore project real quick, and then we'll go back. So there's a Restore project that Commissioner Kohler actually put forward last year. And so if you'd seen in the paper, we did a watershed management plan for Bayotahar and Carpenter's Creek, or Bayotahar, And so, we've got a similar project for BioGrand, and what that means is an engineering study that looks at all the water inputs that come into BioGrand. And so it's gonna look for opportunities where we can do stormwater improvements, so we don't have just direct stormwater discharge into the bayou, looking for ways to improve the quality of the water going into BioGrand, so that, you know, after rainfall events, you're gonna have better initial water quality than you do today. So it's something to help clean up the bayou. A component of that is, having, kind of a set of charrettes, for the community on how Navy Point Park should be managed. As I've been with the county for 26 years and involved with Navy Point Park for most of it. And so as you go up and down the stretch, you know, you'll have a group of folks that, you know, want vegetation cut along here because it interrupts their line of sight to the bayou, their enjoyment. Except the problem with that is the neighbor next door, likes the shrubbery there because, you know, critter X they see there often. And so there's always been kind of conflicting ideas within the neighborhood, you know, what should Navy Point Park look like? And so what we're gonna try to do is something similar to what the state parks do. If you ever participate with the state parks, they run 5-year plans that have community input. And so it can be anything, Mel brought up mowing as well. It could be how is the park managed? You know, do you manage this stretch of park a little different than this stretch of park? But it's an open process so that everyone's on the same page, you know, at least for a period of 5 years until you get more public input. So hopefully what'll happen is it'll minimize some of the conflicts that seem to happen on the best uses of the park. You know, one of the other, you know, kind of an emerging topic that's coming up is on the walking path that kind of evolved into a multi-use path, that now we're starting to see more and more powered items on it. You know, technically, anything powered is not legal in the park. And in the last 6 months, I think we've had more complaints than we've ever had between golf carts and e-bikes and powered scooters, and so it's.
So, Tim, so it is not designated multi-use?
No, it was a walking path.
Okay.
But it's, you know, is there an objection specifically to, you know, someone easing down on their, you know, whatever, their beach cruiser? Well, it's, you know, it's a family park,
Mhm.
and as long as, you know, it's being utilized safely, you know, it's kind of part of just being tolerant of, you know, the other users.
That's what they asked.
But,
isn't it?
well, and you know, the hard part is, you know, I think everyone could generally agree that, you know, a small family with their range of bikes going slowly down the path seems perfectly nice to everybody. But then you get, you know, a young kid running, you know, at a high rate of speed on a powered bike, weaving around people, well, you somewhere between there, you cross the line. So it's,
Could there be a sign, a bunch of signs that clearly say no powered vehicles?
But we have
that's
one.
that's the ordinance, that's the law in every park in the county.
I don't remember seeing a sign.
We have, yeah, there's signs that say no motor vehicles.
Yes.
And the golf carts drive right by them.
Kind of like stop signs and traffic lights, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
Arsenal.
you know, so, and it's, you know, and the hard part with that is, you know, technically, if code was there, code could probably run them out. As long as they, you know, listen to them, you know, code's not law enforcement, so they can't really make you do anything. Then it's a matter of whether, you know, sheriff's office has an officer available to deal with it while there's still something going on. And so, you know, if you got the same person that, you know, runs it every day at the same time, well, that's predictable enough, they can probably, you know, talk with one of our boys in green. But, you know, random utilization by, you know, kids or, or even big kids, you know, can be challenging, you know, for the sheriff's office to prioritize unless something happens.
Billy?
This is kind of 2 points. Code enforcement, you know, I do understand it's complaint driven, which creates its own problem. If you've got a really vocal person that's, you know, the high grass is this tall, you know, it needs to be mowed. Is there ever any thought to, because what I'd like to see is these guys driving the county, the area, in the worst houses. They could pick those and write them up, you know, because if we can get down to where it's just mowing, we got bigger problems than just mowing.
Yeah, I mean, we tear down over 30 homes every year,
Yeah.
and it's, you know, the vast majority, we'll just say, is on the south side.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, once we know it or aware of it, and they start, unless they fix it, you know, somewhere between 1 and 2 years, if it's not fixed, we're probably tearing it down. But realistically, unless it's a drug house that we're already coordinating with the sheriff's office on, you know, reasonably, the code enforcement process where I'm gonna tear down a home, I generally don't like to see that happen faster than a year. And it's just, there's a number of reasons. I mean, it could have been a blight for a long time, but the other part is, you know, you do have owners, it could have been sitting in an estate where you didn't have someone that had power of attorney, and it took a while to get it resolved. There's always a number of factors, so it's, you know, I do wanna be, you know, have caution when I'm tearing down a home, because I can't put it back once I tear it down. If whoever owned it managed to get it sold and someone's willing to put money in it and make it productive. Because, you know, when I tear it down, you know, pick your favorite lot somewhere that's inland in Navy Point, and I spend $20,000 or $25,000 on it, throw a $25,000 lien on it, and you've got a $25,000 lot. Who wants to spend 50 grand for that lot and make it productive? Cause it's, you know, and rightfully so, my board generally, does not like, you know, if I ran daily fines before tearing it down, maybe there's another $20,000 in soft costs in daily fines. You know, if someone's willing to put money in and make something productive happen there, the board frequently will forgive that $25,000 on the soft costs, but they do not like giving away, if I spent actual $25,000 of hard money, to give that to, you know, give that public dollars away to allow, you know, the redevelopment of that lot. So it's, then road department has to cut it 4 times a year. So it's, you know, there's a balance.
So, sticking with the bayou for a minute, there have been,
I'm gonna say, back to the park thing.
Yeah.
I
Thank
wanna
you.
know, like, what's up with that, because.
Thank you.
You talking
Yeah.
about triangle?
No, I'm talking about the
You're talking
linear
about-
park,
Navy
the
Point
main
Park,
park.
the
And
linear park.
Triangle Park is
Trail.
actually the same plat as the linear park, along with that
Oh.
little section that sits behind the houses to,
Well,
to
you
the
just
west
do
of
a
the sunset.
petition if anybody tries to do it.
Yeah, I wish it were that easy. We need it protected. So Tim, is this a good time to get it protected, and how do we do it?
So, well,
Will
So-
you be our liaison to
Well,
work
I'm
with our
happy to be the
commissioner to
liaison for
preserve
that.
that
It's-
park?
so part of it really is gonna be, you know, obviously, one, you need a champion in the commissioner. And he's gotta be able to count to 3. But to me, kind of the part that needs to be teased out, really with county legal is maybe what's the best instrument that everyone believes, you know, would bear the weight on making sure it's preserved in perpetuity. You know, cause I am personally aware of, we had periods of time where the board, because the budget was bad, was talking about surplusing parks because of the ongoing maintenance. The board had talked about it, but to my knowledge, it had never been something that actually, you know, got to a motion and a vote. So it's, you know, there is something to it's at the surface. It's definitely happened as a discussion in the past. I just haven't seen a board, take that final step to where they're actually getting rid of parks.
But specifically, thank you for backing me, there have been serious discussions about the possibility of selling Navy Point Park in particular.
It's,
Mr. Tewart, God
It's-
rest
I'm aware
him,
of-
passed away.
Yep.
He passed away while the discussions were ongoing about parceling the park off. And staff knows that that had gotten a certain way down the road when he passed.
So I
God
don't know
bless
how
him.
far down the road it would have gotten. I am aware of the conversations
Yeah,
happened
thank you,
at a
thank
high
you.
level.
I'm just,
Wait,
so,
I'm still not clear as to like, I don't understand.
exactly.
Somebody's, they wanna sell the park and somebody wants to buy it and do what? Like,
So, well, it's before we go too far. So there's a lot to happen. There have been prior commissioners in this district that had championed in ways to try to find one to lower, general fund burdens for the county. Because, parks, provide a great benefit to everyone. There are, and it's easier to pick on, a small neighborhood park that may be used a little bit by the area neighbors, but it doesn't have a regional draw. Maybe you don't see more than a couple people at any given time, but we cut it every week. We maintain playground equipment, we maintain pavilions, we're maintaining the park.
For instance, Corey Park, which we saved from being privatized.
The board has talked at times on reducing the number of parks, because, just in general, parks are something that's typically associated with city services and with a city millage rate. So typically where you have a lot of parks that are nice parks, you're typically in the city where you're paying higher taxes, so you're paying higher taxes to have more quality of life, amenities in the county, or in your neighborhood. The conversations that Al were talking about, you please correct me on the year, cause I've been here so long, I get blurry on years. The last time I'm really aware of it was more towards 2012, but once again, you may have a better recollection of timing. To my knowledge, there hasn't been much in the way of surplusing county parks in quite a while.
So there's no one currently trying to buy the
No.
park? I've only been in the neighborhood a year and a half, and I can tell you that it's frequently visited by
Right.
many people that love that
Oh,
park.
yeah, no, so,
They walk their dogs, they jog, they
So Navy
exercise, they
Point
go to
Park-
the beach.
right.
And the
Navy-
exercise equipment is falling apart, so I don't see how they're spending money taking care of that.
So Tim, I don't wanna lead people astray, so I wanna say, I am sorry if anybody mistook me to say, this is not a clear and present danger, but we have a really good commissioner right now,
Okay.
who is
So we just wanted to-
he's very reasonable, so now is the time to strike when the iron is hot, because the last one tried his dead level best to get this thing to the point where he could sell it, and we fought him off for 6
So do you
years
just
on
like
it.
to see it preserved like on a national registry because of the history of the park? But there's
However-
no pending, there's no current like.
Just so that the county, so let's say that 15 years from now, we have a different commissioner who decides that he's got a developer friend that he wants to
I
dish
get it,
that
I just
park
wanted to
to.
understand, cause I
Yes.
love the park as well, I don't want some, private, but if
Yes.
there's no current present, I just
Right.
wanted to make sure there's no.
Yeah, I mean, it would be Navy Point Park, like Beulah Park, Lexington Terrace is another one that's up and coming very quickly. There's kind of large regional parks. I think if you have a park that's getting a lot of utilization, just politically, I think it would be very challenging for a board to surplus it.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
just-
is. People
I
love
mean,
that park,
I live
families
up
go
in-
to the beach and,
Sure, I live in Pine Forest. It's especially when my kids were little, when the trail was new. We would frequently utilize it. I would strongly suspect if someone, if we were to, see it, someone trying to sell it, as long as it's still being utilized, you would pack the boardroom with people objecting.
Yeah,
To
okay,
getting rid
and I'll
of it.
start
And so it's, the other part of it
As long as we
as
caught
well.
it in time, as
Yeah.
long as we caught it in time,
Yeah.
Tim, you know how that goes.
So, and the other part is, as Mel brought, there are at least the appearance, I'm gonna say the appearance of, because I haven't read it, but there's already the appearance of deed restrictions on the property as when it was dedicated to the public. So it may have some challenges, even if we sold it off, whether those would attach to it. But what Mel's bringing up is to try to get rid of that uncertainty and
Just lock it.
and try to lock it down with the board that we have now.
Yes.
So
And
what
then
would be the process, assuming that the county writ large wanted to sell a park?
It would be put on as a surplus. So it would, basically, it would go onto a website where there would effectively be an online auction.
You know, the planning
Like
board.
buying a bulldozer.
And it can, and Glenn, it can
Yeah, I mean,
happen
we
fast.
have property where we surplus, I mean, we surplus property all the time.
So it could slip through and not know about it until the week before it happens.
Yep.
Well, I mean, it would take, there would have to be a board action to sell it.
Okay.
And then once the board action to
Right.
sell it happened, then it could go onto the auction site and then, well, then ultimately it could.
I think this is hugely important, and I can almost see having, a meeting devoted to it. We've got about 5-10 minutes left. Want to go over some old business, new business. So Mel, thank you for bringing this up.
Thank you,
Tim,
Ted.
thank you for what you shared. But again, I think we all agree that putting, I don't know, I'll get to you. But if, Kevin, you have something to say, but then I do want to try and move the meeting to, move along.
So one other thing I'll do real quick, is anyone, if you wanna talk to me more, I'll give you a cell phone. If anyone wants it, although I see familiar faces, most of them probably have it.
You mean you're gonna gift us with a phone, like a bat phone to you, Tim?
Right?
Wanted
I
one for
answered
years.
So,
All right, so, in the past, there have been projects that happened that the slippery slope was not, anyone was actually notified officially that the project was going to be happening prior to the project happening. And my concern is something like the strip along the backside of Sunset, that 1 3/4 acres. How do the Navy Point residents know if, say, ECUA decided to go ahead and put one more lift station on that chunk of property? And who would be the adjoiners? The people who are actually going to look out their backyard at that thing, or the adjoiners who live right next door to the address of the park itself?
Because technically, when Navy Point was incorporated, and this is what makes it tricky because we're unincorporated now, we, all the plat owners of Navy Point, collectively owned that public park. And so now nobody's sure, right, legally, but if something was gonna happen in one part of the park, does every single homeowner in Navy Point get to know about it, or is it only gonna be the people across the street? Or, like with the shell piles, will it be no one, we don't have to because nobody technically abuts it? That's the fear. Except for a few plats, like Kevin's talking about, there's the one single plat on Cusino that abuts the park. And then there's that strip of properties that abut that back section of the same plat where, we talked about doing the water, but it didn't go. If something were going to happen in that park, who gets, let's not even talk about selling it. Let's just say, somebody decides to come in and somebody in the county goes, oh, okay, we're gonna let you run a so-and-so and we're gonna let you build a building in the park, for instance, and something slips through the cracks. Who gets noticed?
Sure done what, well, the only waterfront property in Navy Point, to my knowledge,
Is the the one that?
is right at the end,
Mhm.
and the man that owned that died about a year and a half ago.
Right.
So I don't know if it's actually on the market right now, or,
Well,
what's going on.
But none of us actually abut or join the park legally,
Yeah.
except for that.
Right.
There's
Except
that
that one
property,
lot,
and then
right.
there's that little slice of park, which it's
Across
all
the
the same
street from
plat. Yeah,
it's from the same
on
lot, yeah.
Sunset,
Some south and some
Sunset,
north.
where, you know, to the west of that, those folks actually abut the park.
Yeah. I mean,
Nobody else
again,
does.
I think this is a big thing, and I think it's its own hour, really.
Well, now would be a good time to do it because it's,
Well, I'm sorry, Ted, it's just because Tim is
No,
here,
no,
it's just
I
the
get it.
technical question of
Yeah,
who
no,
would,
no, I
who would get
understand.
I'll do it
notified.
this way, the better answer to it is when we start the process and actually work to set a 5-year plan for the park, is then you have a public process in which whatever is gonna happen in the park, and it sets it happens in the park. But, you know, to build a building or to do something, you have to have a concession with Michael Rhodes, which has to go to the board. So there would, if you had someone private doing something in the park, it would have to go to the board through Michael Rhodes as a concession.
Unless you're Horace, and then you believe that you can just shop it to Allison and call it a day.
I would say we're on different sides of it, because I know what he's saying, but I do not believe that you can do that.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Tim?
I have one quick one then regarding the park and natural resources. I've got some experience recently about vines and how rapidly they take over trees and houses, and I've doubted a bunch. We recently had a very wonderful kayaking, community kayaking thing, and I noticed on the north side of Navy Point, along the water, on the park, there's several very nice pine trees. I would say heritage pine trees. The vines are going up and will clobber and choke out those trees. And I was wondering if there was a way that the experts could go out there and evaluate it and kill those vines.
We can have someone look. I just need to know where.
There's
it's-
a swing set that people are using to swing
Yeah,
into the
it's-
water.
Yeah.
And if
So
anybody
who would we
knows
call?
about that address, but there's a clump of trees there that's got undergrowth around it, and so the vines are shooting up these
Yeah,
trees.
the whole north side, I mean, it's that horrible thing that has a tuber a foot deep, you know, it's
Yeah.
really hard to get rid
It's
of.
probably Smilex.
It is
It's
Smilex.
It
Smilex.
is.
It's Smilex.
And it's all over.
Yeah.
Thank you,
And
it's all
what'll happen
over.
is those trees will get choked out and die, and we'll lose
so
these.
walk around with your hand clippers and
Yeah.
nip them in the bud.
Well, and that's sort of the Friends of kind of
Let
thing.
it die and blow out next winter.
So,
So it would be
Just
great
very-
if somebody could take a look
yeah,
at it.
so, yeah, if you know it, I'll give you a cell phone number,
Okay.
which is 850-554-3073. Although I bet at least a third of the people in here already have it. Yeah, that's me, it's Tim Day.
One more time, please.
Sure, 554-3073.
Thank you.
I want to ask a question. There were a few posts that were talking about the E. coli counts and things taken and the frequency or infrequency of the waters being tested, particularly in the winter months. I think that Bayou Grande is tested 3 times a year, maybe.
I'll double check, I thought we had that on a monthly status.
Yeah, it's.
But we run monthly, but the 3 times a year is probably the Healthy Beaches done by the state.
All right, so the county does one, and are those
We
where?
we test, a little over 60 sites every month.
Is that what you're doing?
But we're not testing for Healthy Beaches, we're testing for actual water quality, not for human health purposes.
Right.
But we have, some of our tests can be, you can infer.
Can it be multi-purpose? I mean, you know, it's.
So the DOH is who tests for the human, the DOH tests for not just human, but specifically fecal matter.
Yeah, I was just curious because I'd seen it and it seemed, at least I was unclear about who's doing what, how often, and if there's an issue, if it's, where it's posted.
Let me tell you real quickly, we've been on Navy Point for 60-some odd years, same place, across the bayou. Ducks are the worst thing on earth. Every one of them produces a quarter pound of, or 3/4 of a pound of duck dung,
Yeah.
which the minnows and all disperse it, and you don't, it hurts the water.
At least we don't have
tell
any
more.
geese, because they're worse.
No, we have them.
Yeah.
Oh, God,
And it's,
these will
and
chase
it's
you.
full of flukes,
Yeah.
full of flukes that'll make your dog
So
sick.
it's that plus beavers. The beaver are the other
Yeah.
ones I have issues with.
Yeah, and they go up
I
to
get
the
water.
sunset thing, and they have county authority to put a dam in.
Creek on Mill Road.
Yeah, air and everything
Any
else.
more questions for Tim?
On the page.
Tim, any parting words?
Yeah.
No, I mean,
No,
I think-
but thank you all. I apologize. I didn't have a spiel for you, but I figured once we started, we'd probably use the time pretty quickly.
conversations will be wrapped up.
One last thing, I gotta know we still continue parking alley. Parking in the alley, 100% of the time, like the driveway, I don't know about that. The 2 times I've asked them to do it, we got confrontation with them, I'm not gonna take the chance of not escalating that.
So it's blocking it where you can't get through?
Parks in the middle of the alley, 100% of the time.
So we can try it with code. The problem with code is my notices are slow.
Understand?
The fast way is the folks that are right here in this building.
Yep.
Okay,
Because it's basically, they're blocking a public right of way.
okay.
And code,
I have to waste their time on something like that.
the code, the fastest code can do is a 48-hour notice. And if
The
he's,
last meeting, I came to this and brought it up, Kohler had been to somebody addressed it because he moved, whatever, stopped doing it for about 3 days. So he had to stop it.
yeah, so it's, I mean, it does sound like, I was talking with Ronnie Rivera earlier today. Sounds like in the next 2 weeks or so, you're gonna start seeing their bike patrol.
Yep, yeah, that was one of the things I wanted to share.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Not
that's
to
great.
take thunder away from you,
No,
but it's,
no,
but one of the places they're gonna be is the alleyways.
yeah, and I was talking with, I asked Bob.
In the sand?
No, it's sheriff's office is gonna be coming through on,
Be no different parking in the middle of the street where I see it.
right, no, and that's one of those things, they can't block a public right of way.
Yeah.
Officer Anderson, are you trading your pickup in?
Do what?
You trading your pickup in for a
Yeah.
bike?
No.
Can we get Duke? Get Duke in the alleyways?
Tim, you already also related to the alleys regarding the mowing, because they're becoming jungles now.
That was, I mentioned that to Ronnie and Chief Hobbs today too. I know they called you, but I don't know if that's Michael or if it's a different part of the
No,
county.
so that'll ultimately be road department.
Road.
We're gonna have to see, just for this time of year, typically, it's just not gonna happen.
They don't
And
mow,
just-
I don't know what the schedule is, but
But it's,
it's over a month.
yeah, I
Oh,
mean.
yeah, well over.
Well, I mean, historically, you know, it's usually done, you know, late winter, early spring. And then it's, in just reality, just the amount of resources there are, it's usually tough to hit it again during the growing season.
What about with the inmate labor?
That's with inmate labor.
Okay.
It's just ultimately, we have a lot of road miles and not, let's call it limited resources. I think road department's typically running with about 40 vacancies. And so it's, you know, for whatever reason, people don't wanna work for, $20-25 an hour.
And Tim, they don't take the inmates into the alleys because Chief Powell considers it a running concern, FYI.
Well, just, the straight shot on the alleys, it certainly may be possible, you run a bush hog down pretty fast, at least open the flat part out in a hurry, but, I don't wanna commit for road department what they're gonna do. I brought up to road department and county administrator earlier today that, we need to take a peek at it. And-
Yeah, because I asked about getting the bike patrols, they said as soon as the Blue Angel week is over, they'll follow up there. I said, it'd be great if they could get in the alleys, but they can't right now because it's, up to your thighs. So, and that's when Ron reached out to you. But again, I think the positive thing is we are gonna get the bike patrols initially late afternoon, kind of 3 to 7, something like that. I asked if they could do early mornings as well. They said they'll see what they can do. And there'll be four bike patrol officers. Not sure exactly when, where, but they'll have a presence here on a period of time. Quickly housekeeping, the TNR CAP program, John had sent an email to me and to Mel that they were supposed to be getting on our way. We're going to be reaching out to neighbors about that and providing feedback. I don't know if anyone here has been in contact with John. Okay, no, so hopefully folks had. There is the Sheriff's Department is gonna be doing a movie night, November 21st in Triangle Park for Navy Point residents. That's totally free. That's Speedy on Sunset. I didn't pass this around, but they pulled the results from when they had the speed trap device on West Sunset, the 500 block. No surprise, the average speed there was 98% of the people were, at the speed limit or under, because A, there was so much construction and the sign was very close to Gulf Beach Highway. There was one person who registered for 71. I'll find a way to share these, but the device is on Sunset now, I think around Kayla's Bryant. And they're trying to figure out who owns the two permanent speed signs there, so they can get data to see what sort of traffic and speed issue there is there, and they'll provide that data, hopefully for next month's meeting. Any new business? Anyone have here they want to bring up, Lisa?
They should probably move that speed thing over to in front of the townhomes, because when you go through there, all the way from the one, speed bump, all the way almost down,
On Gibbs?
there's no other speed bumps there, but as you come around that corner, that's where they got the thing that's registering your speed, but then you've got those two speed bumps, so.
Okay. Well, they're
I'm
gonna,
just saying, cause there was a lady the other day, she must've been going about 40, I was walking my dog, and I said, I just went like this, and she said, so I told her to bring it, and she told me to bring it, so I started walking across Triangle, she went in her house, so,
oh, she lived there?
yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Well, it's gonna be there for about another 2 or 3 weeks, and we'll see if they can move it there, because I agree that could be an issue. Any new business, any thoughts? All right, thank you for being here tonight, Tim, thank you so much, appreciate it. We'll get notes out, and, Mel, I definitely wanna follow up with you about, steps to take with the park preservation.
Oh my gosh, I'm not the one to follow up on with that. That would be Tim. I'm so grateful because this is the first time publicly that I think that there's ever been an acknowledgement. Like, everyone knows at the county that there have been a couple of attempts to dish that park off to developers. But I have had a hard time in the past getting people to actually believe that that's the case. And so I'm really grateful that Tim, in his politic way, has let folks know that stranger things have happened, at least, and that as a neighborhood, people need to understand that we have got to be proactive about that. Well, we've got somebody that will help us, because if Mike goes out, God knows who we might get next, and it could be somebody that's first order of business, because the Facebook post went up the first week of the commissionership in 2014 that Navy Point Park was too expensive to maintain. They needed to sell it, but don't worry, they'll offer it to the owners across the street for first dibs. So it's been floating out there for a long time, and even more than the commissioner, the administrator who passed that spring was dead level set, and that was a man who knew how to get things done like that.
Well, Ed, you know more than I do, so.
Because of the history of the neighborhood and its historical whatever, maybe we could take that spin.
Class action lawsuit from all the property owners, they sell a lot for long term.
We gotta know about it before we can bring us. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Thanks, everyone. Great week.
Thank you, though, I agree.
Yes, sir.